keeping USB flash drives secure, using your RSS feed and trying to open sites normally, the most physical pain that we've ever been in, and also email aliasing and how you get blocked with those sometimes, perhaps not in that order, but those are the things that we'll be covering today, of course, starting with the USB flash drive story, because that is the highlight story. Highlight question. This is the Q&A for our surveillance report podcast, and if you want to ask a question, then these all come from people on Patreon, so go ahead and join them on Patreon at patreon.com/surveillancepod, and that's also how you can contribute to this podcast and keep it going for free for the regular episodes where we keep everybody in the loop on what's going on in the world to keep them a little bit safer. Without further ado, let's get into David's question. What practices do you follow to ensure security and privacy when transferring files using USB flash drives? Where in between these extremes, possible malware transference and data transfer of charging devices versus basic computer literacy, do you stop using USB sticks, and what safeguards do you start using as you approach that threshold? Yeah, well, I'll start
Quick
on my
note,
end.
I condensed his question again, just so you know.
Okay. All right, that's a slightly condensed.
So like all that parentheses stuff was me kind of paraphrasing.
Okay. All right, so slightly condensed version of that question, and people in the video version can see the full question. I'll say just myself, I rarely use USB flash drives just from a usability perspective, but when I do, they're normally from myself. So it's normally this is already a flash drive that I purchased brand new. I keep it inside my little tech kit, and it has certain files on it, and it's my own drive. So this kind of applies. It's not really a physical world issue in itself. I think that this is the same thing online where you have certain websites that you know you can trust, and so you can actually maybe reduce certain browser protections on those specific websites. For example, Proton Mail, I might disable some of my aggressive fingerprint protection because I know it's a trusted website, everything's open source, but by default, I'm going to be wary of any website on the internet. Similarly, I'm going to apply that philosophy over to my USB drives, which is, this is mine, I own it, and yes, there's always the possibility that while I was away, someone snagged my flash drive when I wasn't looking, installed malware on it, gave it back to me, but there's so many other things they can do, and I think that's a little bit far-fetched for something that I'm going to be looking at. So for me, if something's trusted and it belongs to you, then that's where I say it's trusted. But if somebody gives me a flash drive, I don't plug it into any of my devices because I can't trust what they did to it. So in those situations, I ask them to send me the files, or that's where something like Bluetooth transferring files can be better. So at least like they have to manually transfer something and they're only going to send me the files they need. At that point, it's no different than downloading a file on the internet and just making sure that you're doing your due diligence on what you're downloading. But I don't know if Nate has something different here.
No, now that you mention it, I'm kind of in a similar boat where it's like the vast majority of flash drives I use are mine, and it's like transferring like actually today I'm upgrading my Lineage phone as we record this, and to go from major version like 20 to 21 requires you to completely reflash it, and the first couple times I tried to download it failed. So I was like, if it failed again, I was literally going to hand my wife a USB stick and be like, hey, can you download this? Because she has wired internet. Can you download this and give it to me? And that's trusted. I don't know everything she does on her computer, but I'm assuming she's, smart enough not to just click every random link she sees. I guess also, yeah, I mean, on the rare occasions I do get USB sticks, I feel like they're for work. Like a client will hand me something and be like, hey, can you give me a copy of that firmware or something that you just uploaded? I'm very tired today. I guess I'm kind of fortunate in the sense that if I ever do need to do anything seriously, like if for some reason I did need to plug in a USB stick, as a Cubes user, I can do that. And I've done that before. Like some of you guys, I love you guys. So far, none of it has been malicious to my knowledge. But some of y'all will send us attachments. And I'm like, I'm not opening this. But as a Cubes user, I can like open a VM and be like, okay, let me open this attachment and see what it is. And like I said, so far, none of it's been malicious. Or at least if it has, it's been contained to that box, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, so I have that luxury. I would say if this is something that you run into on a regular basis where you think this is something you need to worry about, then it might be worth getting I'm sure there's more than just Cubes as a solution, but getting some kind of solution, whether it's Cubes, whether it's a specific device where you can plug these things in and they're air gapped or they're clean and they're contained in such a way where you can make sure the drive is safe before you pass it on to someone else, or pass it on to your regular device. I mean, yeah, I think that's all I got.
On that note, if someone doesn't want to set up cubes and they just want to just load up the flash drive and see what's on it, I actually would probably recommend, if you can, like a mobile operating system before a desktop operating system. Not that they're immune to this kind of thing, but a lot of the malware that I've seen, at least, that are spread across USB flash drives are more geared towards desktop operating systems. So if you're able to get a little adapter and plug it into a mobile operating system, not only are they better sandboxed in most situations, but also the malware is probably not designed for mobile operating systems. So that's another thought. Or if you have an iPad or a Chromebook, just any kind of like not major desktop operating system, and you don't want to use cubes, that's something that I would do as well. And the last thing I'll add here actually is like make sure to like keep things compartmentalized. Like these are my drives. I don't lend my drives to people and I don't plug them into other people's devices. I think that's a very specific thing I should have mentioned earlier. Like my flash drives are for me because they're on my devices that I trust and I know what happened to them. And I have one kind of like whatever flash drive that doesn't keep anything sensitive on it that can be used for random things. If I need to give someone a file, it's going to be plugged into their computer. That drive is the drive I use, but I don't let it touch my normal flash drives. So my flash drives are mine. But then I have kind of like this, I don't know, Frankenstein drive that can go towards anybody.
Going back to the top, our next question comes from Cracker Barrel Biscuits. What's the most physical pain you've ever experienced in your life? That's an interesting question. So the first thing that came to mind, no, when I was in boot camp, I got an infection in my arm that I tried to just power through until my arm swelled up the size of a baseball. And I was finally sent to medical, being very careful to avoid specific words. I was finally sent to medical, and they had to, I don't remember what the medical term for it was, but basically they had to drain it first, which that didn't hurt too much. You know, they just kind of like cut a little hole. I guess I should have warned that this is a little bit graphic, not super graphic, but and then because it had gotten so big, they basically had to like pack it back with gauze. And each day they would have to like take it back out and repack it so that it would slowly heal up right. And there wouldn't be like air pockets in the layers of my skin. And yeah, that was every day for like a week or maybe even more. That was probably, just because it was every day, that was probably the most pain I've been at. There's probably been like worse moments here and there. I actually cut my finger open today. That was fun. But yeah, that was probably the worst. That one didn't hurt because it was just so sudden and unexpected. Bless you. Sorry. You're fine. No, that one didn't hurt because it was just so sudden and unexpected. I was just like, oh crap, that's bleeding a lot. But you know, yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind when I read that question. Was like, oh yeah, that infection, that hurt, that sucked.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one. I can't say I've had anything like that. Mine is I stepped on a leg. No, I
Lego.
yeah.
Right.
No, I mean there's
I
always
think I
there's always
bricked
like
my
very
phone.
painful things that are fairly acute that aren't long term that I guess I've forgotten about at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't know. It's just hard because I feel like I've dodged a lot of pain. My high school running coach, he used to tell us, "Don't do stupid." That was his thing that he used to say, and I feel like it's kept me out of a lot of things that probably would have hurt me pretty badly. And so a lot of my pain is more like things like what you said, like, oh, I ignored it and then it got worse. I don't do that often, but one of the times I did that was when I was dealing with some IT band tightness. It's not really a muscle, but it sure feels like some tightness in the area. But I didn't really back off my running and it just continued to get worse. And what happens for anyone who runs a lot, when your IT band kind of gets inflamed, it starts pulling on your knee. And so before you know it, you start dealing with outer knee pain. And then like every step you take, not just running, but walking and existing, is like a sharp pain that runs through your whole leg. And this was started happening like a week before a big race. And so like the whole week leading up to the race, I don't know if I recommend this. Back then, what I thought was the best move was to just roll out that whole IT band as much as I could. And it worked and I was able to race and I did well, but it was so much pain leading up to it. And I just did everything possible to stay on top of my health. during that time period. But I can't express just how painful it was, and how like just putting the smallest amount of weight down on the ground with your foot just led to an instant, just sharp pain all the way through your leg. Not fun. Now I stay on top of all my hip exercises and my weights, and I don't deal with it anymore. Do your strength training, kids. All right, next question is from Mr. Camel999, a big regular. Don't know how many weeks they've been asking questions, but definitely a lot. When using my RSS feed, I oftentimes come upon some articles that want me to open the link to the full article in my browser rather than letting me read everything within my RSS reader. I know this is mostly an issue of sources, but have either of you encountered this seemingly common issue? At least it's common for me, and have you attempted to solve it? If so, yeah, I can't say I've stumbled on this. Nate, I think, has probably more RSS sources than I use, but on my end, I haven't seen this issue. The only issue I have that's kind of frustrating is Slashdot in my RSS feed, which is one of my big RSS sources. If they link to an external story, for some reason those links don't come up in my RSS reader, so I still have to open it in Slashdot to then get to the primary source. But that's not really the same issue, but it kind of leads to the same result, which is you have to open it in your browser. I will say though, a lot of things that I have my RSS feed for, I don't actually read within my RSS feed. Normally my RSS feed is to notify me about what's new. I look at it and I go, oh, cool, let me click the link and actually go to the website and read this. But I understand that a lot of people also use their RSS feed as their actual reader and not just as a place to just get updates. It's both for them. So, yeah, I guess also consider using your reader mode in your browser if you have one. That could be a small way around this, so you still have some kind of like clean reading experience within your browser as well. I don't know what browser you're using, but that's all I can recommend because, like you said, it's an issue of sources and what they're going to allow you to do, not directly on their website through a normal browser.
I feel like I have had that issue. It is kind of rare where I feel like there are some sources. I want to say Ars Technica does this sometimes, but I could be wrong, where like it'll only pull the first couple of paragraphs and then it's like click to read the rest of the article or something like that. I've never had one that's just straight up like, here's the headline, click to read it, or, you know, usually it at least pulls the first couple paragraphs. And honestly, by that point, it's, you know, at that point, I feel like I know enough of like, am I interested in this to actually go to the webpage and read more, or am I not? Yeah, so I really haven't seen that issue a lot, but on the rare occasions I do, and on the even rarer occasions that it's like, yeah, this is a story I actually want to read more of, I just open it in the browser because I've gone to great lengths to make sure that my browser is reasonably private and secure, and I'm just not that worried about it, personally. So, but if it's happening a lot to a lot of your sources, I understand how that could be an issue. Or how that could be frustrating. And then we go back to what you and Henry both said of, I think at that point it's just an issue of sources, and I don't really have any suggestions other than to see if you can find any sources of equal quality that don't do it. But I'm sure you probably already considered that. So yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, and honestly, look at better sources. Actually, this was a project of mine this last weekend because for certain situations back here, I didn't really have access to files and things like that very consistently this last weekend. And so one of my little side projects was I can't even open Reddit links anymore, which I'm sure many people here are experiencing if they use a VPN. And I did follow
some... that's so annoying.
Yeah, so I was following some
go ahead.
Reddit subreddits. Yeah, some subreddits. It already has Reddit in the name. And I was following some subreddits in my RSS feed, and they were nice because it was just, for example, I follow the advanced running community on Reddit. I don't have an account. I don't really directly follow it through an account. I just want to see like the top few things every day, so at least I know what's going on in the world. But I don't have to like constantly be on Reddit being like, what's going on with everything all at once, which is ridiculous, and no one should do that. And it's objectively just not good for people to do that from a mental health perspective. But I spent probably like an hour trying to find an alternative to that. And I couldn't really find one. I eventually did find something that kind of fit, but it didn't have an RSS feed. I couldn't make it an RSS feed. So I actually made an exception to my very like hard rule of like no email subscriptions. And I did subscribe to their email newsletter because it was literally the only option I had. My point that I have with this is RSS feeds are meant to be swapped out for services that like will integrate well with your workflow to give you a better relationship with your news. And so if a source that you're using doesn't integrate well and doesn't agree with the way you want to consume news, change the source. That's why you're using an RSS client, because it gives you that kind of control. You're not locked into any garden of any sort. So, yeah, that's my personal story of my RSS feed the last week that hopefully ties into you and hopefully inspires you to find better sources that will correspond with what you want.
Our last question comes from Banana, who says, I've been meaning to set up email aliasing for a while, and my question is, have you ever had trouble where you provide your alias to a site, they accept it at first, but then you don't receive emails? My main concern is in switching all my accounts over that I will lock myself out because along the way the site rejects the email address and not all sites let you provide a backup email to contact you. In that case, if an alias isn't accepted, will the site just tell you outright at the beginning? Perhaps I'm being overly cautious. First of all, I think it's good to be, to an extent, overly cautious. It's good to ask these questions at least, even if you end up saying like, I'm probably overthinking it. At least you asked the question. I've had some issues, and I haven't had them often enough to really narrow down what they are. But I've had one place where when I send something from my custom domain, they never got it. But when I sent it from Proton directly, it went through, which I was not real thrilled about. But so I think that was a case of just their corporate policies restricting that MX record for some reason. I've definitely run into sites who are like, no, you have to use a mainstream email provider like Gmail or an email address that we see has been caught in a data breach. I think Michael Basil has mentioned that before. That's super annoying, but it is what it is, I guess. I've only run into that once in person, but I've heard of that happening in other cases. I'm currently having a site where I'm trying to do some testing. My emails from them are very hit or miss. Sometimes I get them, sometimes I don't, which is really annoying because I actually called in to support last week, and they were like, oh yeah, you should have gotten an email about this upcoming thing. And I'm like, nope, never saw it. Your IT people don't like me. But also there's a hyphen in my email address for them, so I'm wondering if maybe that's an issue, and I'm trying to get that switched out. I think that might be the main thing to focus on. Like your big concern here is that you'll lock yourself out because originally they accepted it and now they don't. Personally, I've never seen that happen where like they used to accept it and now they don't. But I think if you just kind of start noticing, if you normally get emails from them and then you stop getting emails, and maybe one way you could do that is, there's a lot of ways you could do that. You could sign up to their newsletter. You could have it send you notifications every time you log in. And I think if you start noticing like, I seem to not be getting the emails as much anymore, then maybe it might be time to think about like, okay, do I need to switch my domain? Do I need to switch providers? Do I need to close this account? Whatever the case may be. But yeah, I've never seen that, but I do think it is certainly a valid question to ask. And I think the solution here would be just to figure out, how can you be alerted if things are going in that direction?
Yeah, I don't have much to add outside of what Nate shared. It's a tough situation. I get really upset. I actually still don't know to this day because a lot of accounts that I open, this has been a recent thing. A lot of accounts I open just tell me your account's restricted or you're blocked. Please verify XYZ in order to proceed. And I don't actually know what's triggering that. I don't know if it's my browser. I don't know if it's VPN. I don't know if it's email alias. And I don't know if I don't know. They're not making it very clear. This is always a tricky situation. It is the risk that you take when you use aliasing services. And if you want a better middle ground, consider custom domains. And again, custom domains, I think people associate, like, yes, if you use the same custom domain alias across 5 accounts, then theoretically, if those 5 accounts are speaking to each other, they can figure out, other accounts that you own. But you can just buy a random domain that's not directly tied to you, right? Nate over here can buy natesbigarm.com, and no one's going to know who that is directly unless, because the who is will probably be private. And so it's very unlikely. And I know I've seen some people say that they still got blocked using custom domains, but I think it's a lot more rare because you have to keep in mind that businesses use custom domains and they're not going to just block any custom domain because it's not Gmail or something like that. So that's been my experience. But outside that, I don't know what other options there are outside of just contacting them and hoping that they understand that you're a real person with real needs and real feelings. Well, that is it for the Q&A. Again, if you have a question for us, it could be something about us. It can be the second greatest pain we ever felt, which I think both of us would really struggle with that, actually. So do not ask that one, please. It could be about something privacy and security related. It could be about technology in general, just anything you want to ask us. And if you want to do that and support the podcast, join our Patreon down below, patreon.com/surveillancepod. It's, I think, $5 a month you can join the Q&A, which really isn't much, but if even 10 people do that, like, that's huge for us, and it really like enables us to do some really cool things back here. So $5 a month at this point, cup of coffee, and that really helps us out a lot and takes us pretty far. So thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you for the surveillance report, and have a good week.